Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. I have two guests on. I have Rod McCall on right now. He was last on February 24th, 2021, season 2, episode 18. He is an author of the book Love of Eric, Surviving Divorce, Parental Alienation, and Life After, which is found on Amazon. And I'm also pleased to have Melanie Davis back on. She was last on my show April 13th of 2021, season 2, episode 36. She is the publisher of our books of Triumph Press. And just love Melanie and Rod. So I'm so glad you guys are back on, and welcome back.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
I'm
I'm
glad.
excited. Important topics that you're covering. So I'm glad to
Amen.
see you're keeping your show strong and active. So
Oh, I'm glad. I'm trying. You know,
You are.
it's so hard, you know, when you get comments from people that either parental alienation is junk science or they don't want to use this word anymore. And I don't know how you two feel about that, but I think parental alienation, the word, I think it's here to stay, and not call it custodial interference or parental deprivation. It's like these judges are confused as it is. Why confuse?
Down here in Texas, a new term has been used. It's called resist and refuse. But it's all the same thing. I mean, you can call it hostile, aggressive parenting. Again, you know, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So you can call it a pigeon, but it's still a duck.
You know, one of the reasons I wanted to come and be a part of this, Marianne, is we're talking leading up to it. I am not personally a victim of parental alienation. I'm not a targeted parent. However, I published your book and Rod McCall's book, For the Love of Eric. And obviously, parental alienation is right there in his title. And what I've been observing as somebody who's very passionate about your cause, even though I don't have to be one that's hurting directly to care and to see the issues that we have in our courts generally. But I am seeing the word parental alienation under attack. I think if we're really going to get down to the crux of the issue that we're here to talk about, and I think it's really important for your listeners, because I think the majority of your listeners are probably people who are dealing with the family court. And the title of your book is Dismantling Family Court Corruption, add that word. So obviously that's what your listeners are here for. So I think it's important for everybody to understand that this is a battle that's being waged, sort of like bickering between those who need to be uniting. And the bickering is being caused by what I refer to as the beast, and that's the courts when they're being corrupt, which seems to be more the norm than not. I've seen where people are saying, oh, well, we can't use that term because if you use that term, you won't be taken seriously. Okay, so who is saying that you can't be taken seriously if you use the term parental alienation? It's the courts that know that's a powerful word because it's simple, it's succinct, it states exactly what's happening. And I believe that when there's a powerful weapon, like a phrase that way, that those who don't want it used are going to do everything they can to throw it out. And the problem is that so many who are dealing with this are starting to embrace this as if this is the new direction that we need to go in. I see this all the time. Like I said, I'm actually ghostwriting and publishing other books on the same similar topics. So, and in the course of working on that, more and more I'm seeing where people are saying, hey, don't use that term, you won't be taken seriously, you're gonna lose in court. That's just like bowing to your captor, really. And I know, Rod, you can bring this up. There's actually a law that's been passed that seems to be further dividing. What I see parents. When I say parents, I mean the fathers and the mothers who have been abused, who have been alienated, they need to be banding and fighting together, because together you're a strong force. To say that you can't use the word parental alienation and having some of you agreeing and arguing with the other half, and then something like Kayden's law, which I'll let Rod explain, again, it's dividing men and women. So when I see a movement, father's rights, or a movement of mothers saying fathers are abusers, they've got it all wrong, because now you've alienated half of the army, half of the force that needs to be joining with you. And together you can make a difference. Divided, you know, you might as well give up, really, because infighting is, what is that, what's that phrase, that a house divided cannot stand? I think that's Lincoln. Well, the same thing very much applies when it comes to fighting against the injustices that you're facing as parents.
I agree.
Absolutely. I mean, in dealing and talking with, you know, alienated parents all over the country, I can tell you it's not a man issue. It's not a woman issue. It's a people issue. And again, when I hear individuals say, well, it's mostly men that are doing it, or it's mostly women that are doing it, I disagree with it. The idea that it is junk science is a load of baloney as well. In fact, there was a paper that came out earlier this year. In fact, came out, I want to say May of this year, that was published, and it's talked about the amount of research. In fact, most of the research that has been going on in parental alienation has taken place just in the last 5 years. And, or I guess they said since 2016. And the idea of it being junk science, well, you know, you're always going to get naysayers. Pick a topic. They're going to, I mean, I think you got people saying that the earth is flat. So there's always those that are going to disagree. And I agree with you that there needs to be a more concerted effort on the parts of the various groups and organizations. I belong to and I'm part of the Parental Alienation Study Group, which does a lot of work in talking about or researching and publishing articles on the science behind parental alienation. As a school teacher for 20 years, I've seen the effects in the classroom of the students who are constantly having issues, and not necessarily directly related to alienation, but it is directly related to mom and dad getting a divorce. I've been doing a lot of work and research into and combining the effects of divorce with the ACE study, or the Adverse Childhood Experience study, done, well, crying out loud, back in 1999, or well, it was published in 1999. And again, the more you look, the more you see. And so when I hear folks attack and go on about how that it's not real, I have a hard time keeping silent. So when y'all approached and said, hey, you want to be on to talk about this, it's kind of like, sign me up. Absolutely.
Right. It's also hurtful to some parents that are going through parental alienation to hear it being shot down and talked about so poorly when they're going. It's like it's being abused all over again. And these people trying to shoot it down don't care.
I think it's interesting to I think we need to define who is shooting it down, first of all. Well, I think there's two things we need to do. First of all, I think it's important for everybody to recognize that that's the right word. You know, I think it's the most descriptive word in a short, succinct way, you know, because it says who's doing it and what's happening. And that other phrase, I don't remember what you said, Rod, that, you know, what was the little phrase that they're using now? Something combative.
Oh, resist and refuse.
Okay, that could be applied to anything, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's as generic and as watered down as you can get, I think. So clearly, that's not a good replacement for the term parental alienation. So we need to understand how important that term is, and then we need to decide or to determine who is trying to tear that term down and throw it out. And I do see, like I said, I see there's a lot of what I would call cooperation on the part of those that should be defending that term. And I don't understand it. I really don't understand it but then again, and I think it'd be good, Rod, for you to, or maybe Marianne, to talk a little bit about this Cadence law and what that is about, because my understanding is basically a law that states that only women are abused and only men do it. Just put it in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. And that I believe it got passed somewhere. I'm just setting the ball for you guys to kind of continue the rally here. But when I look at something like that, and I think women think that's the women who are behind it. I'm not going to classify all women, obviously, but whoever is behind that law, who's celebrating that law as a success, they're operating on half a brain, because there's just no way in the world, first of all, that's logical. There's no law that should ever take one full population and say they are right and this population is wrong. I mean, I don't even see how that's a constitutional law, let alone one that is accomplish anything. So, okay, so we're just going to throw all men under the bus and say all men are bad and we're good. That's alienating the children in and of itself. So I think that we all have to kind of get this very, not even bird's eye view, maybe rocket ship view, of the situation. Really take a big step back and say, what is the problem? Who is behind it? And how do we effectively fight it? Because I think anybody listening to this podcast, no matter which side of this argument you might be on or this conversation you might be on, I think there's one thing I would hope we're all agreeing on, and that is that the abuse that's happening to families by the family court needs to stop. And if that's our end goal, then we have to take this very high atmospheric view of the problem and say, what is going to stop it? And arguing about a term like parental alienation is clearly not going to affect anything. But it definitely, like you said, it makes those who are trying to use the term, and certainly, Rod, you're using the term in your book. It's on the title of your book. You're doing research. And I don't know if you're able to announce it yet. So I'm not trying to put you out there in a bad way, but I happen to know that you're working on in a scientific way, on some services that will help and utilize that term. So you definitely can't have that term getting bludgeoned and thrown out. Am I right?
Oh, yeah. Kayden's law is something that was passed by Congress, the National Congress, earlier this year as part of the National Violence Against Women's Act. And it's in response to a young girl who was killed by her father during visitation. And what this is there's a lot to it, but when it comes right down to it, there is the group it's the Violence Against Women's group or organization that is going after, or that is promoting this law. And they've passed it again in Congress, but because family law is dealt by the state courts, the state legislators get to make a lot of these laws. There is now a national movement to push a version of Kayden's law in every one of the 50 US states. And what it basically boils down to is that it is men that perpetuate the violence against women and against children, and that women are the victim in all cases, and that according to, as I have understood it, and it has been explained to me, that with Kayden's law, it will allow me as a school teacher, I'm also trying to become a professional counselor, but teachers, counselors, anybody that is a required reporter of violence against a child has to report it, but they are not allowed to testify in court. They are not allowed to explore any investigation into this, that it is only the men that are the perpetuators. It is only the women, the mothers, that are the victims, and that only violence against women organizations are allowed to provide education, research. They're the only ones that can testify in court. And it's kind of like, as I was reading up a little on this, and as it was explained to me, I was going, well, that's a load of baloney. In fact, I was a victim. My son was a victim because of his mother. The research shows that it is a mental illness issue rather than a gender issue, that there are men and women around the country, around the world for that matter, that engage in this. If you have borderline personality disorder, if you have narcissistic personality disorder, histrionics disorder, there are several key mental health issues that seem to be what is in common with the parents that engage in trying to destroy the relationship between children and one of the two parents that occur during marriage and frequently after marriage during the divorce process. But it's not a man only issue. And so the idea that this is a violence against women's issue, well, that's where I started to step in. And there was a group that successfully helped reorganize and reword the Cadence law that was ultimately put before the governor of California here earlier this year. And again, the idea is alienation can happen to pretty much anybody, and it's not just a man thing.
Well, I agree. It's happening to everybody. It's very disturbing that someone can place a false allegation on someone and it's going to be believed, and you're going to get hauled into court over this. It's like the red flag laws that are coming that some states have adopted.
No, I agree. And with the idea of a false allegation, well, both of us were falsely accused of doing things. And the idea that we're going to believe it if it comes from the woman making the allegation, well, then it's automatically believed. And now you're guilty and you have to prove yourself innocent. Is bad enough. You have to do that in the court of public opinion, but to do it in front of the legal court system as well, to me, that flies in the very face of our judicial system that promotes the idea that you are innocent until proven guilty. And if we're going to take that away, well, we've got a variety of issues then that people maybe want to be a little more aware of. And again, the idea that Cadence law is out there, it's gaining a lot of traction. And the
That's
folks
what's
that
scary.
are
That's what's scary. That's why we got to speak up right now before it gets any more traction. Again, I can't even imagine how anybody who's using logic and critical thinking can look at this and see how this is helpful. Yeah.
well, and it's when you get in front of the court, it's a he said, she said. Melanie asked a little bit ago, well, who's fighting against this? I cannot say outside the state of Texas because I live here in Texas, in the North Texas region. And what I keep seeing and hearing and finding out is it's the Texas Family Law Association. And they are predominantly made up of family court lawyers, and they are afraid of the billions and billions of dollars that they make collectively on the conflict. And the more conflict they can create, well, then that's fine. That's better. We're finding that there's, a lot of things that go into, okay, alienation is brought up. Well, again, now you get a judge, maybe you get a lawyer that is bringing, oh yeah, you're bringing that up again.
Yeah.
Well, that's just, one parent trying to get out of paying child support. It's kind of like, no, I'll pay child support. I'm happy to pay child support. I just want to see my kids. That's, I went from being a parent to now an every other weekend parent. Now you're going to try and take that away as well. But
I'm curious, is there a movement, and if there isn't, there should be, that's specifically intended to unite men and women, fathers and mothers, to have a stronger push against the court corruption that we're seeing? It seems to me, I see a lot of fathers' rights, and then there's this violence against mothers, and to me, these seem like counterproductive, even though I'm sure they feel like they're going to make an impact. But when they divide into just half of the whole who are suffering, and then point the finger at each other. Is there a movement out there that recognizes that that's not an effective way to make a change where change needs to happen desperately? Do you know of a movement like that? Just curious.
There's a lot of different groups.
Yeah.
There are, what I have found in my work with different groups and organizations is that there's a lot of hurt out there. There's a lot of anger out there, and there's a lot of finger pointing that go on that make it hard for groups to collaborate and work effectively together. You've got professionals that, belittle other professionals. And I don't get it. I guess I'm not smart enough to understand why we're allowing anger and egos to cloud our collective, but we all want the same thing. The various groups and organizations that I have worked with, talked with, semi-interacted with. And so I am all on the research side, the idea of working towards working with mental health professionals, getting standards put out there, put into ethical standards, getting in front of lawyers, getting in front of judges, and explaining, hey, look, there are ethical standards that are currently in place. And when you're kind of ignoring some of these ethical standards, these ethical practices, when you're doing certain actions, activities, behaviors. And so the idea of fighting, well, that actually helps the folks that are the junk science people that Marianne mentioned a little bit ago, gives them credibility, and it helps them fight against the real science that is out there, the real findings that are showing that when mom and dad fight and put the child in the middle, the damage and destruction is real. It's visible. You can see it. There's not the physical scars that come with sexual abuse, that come with physical abuse, but they're there. And as a school teacher, I've seen them. I work with some mental health professionals. They see it. In Eric's case, it was easy to see. His first grade teacher was very attuned to watching Eric's behavior, and to the point that she has now become a professional counselor, and which is where I'm headed. I have seen too much of this, and I want to do more than what I'm doing. I want to do even more. And so I too am becoming a professional counselor to become involved. And I am working with a pair of ladies that we have devised a way to assess using science, using acceptable standards and practices that will take the issue of he said, she said in a court of, in a legal court setting, when mom and dad are arguing and the idea of sabotage of visitation rights comes up. Well, we are working on, they don't have everything copyrighted. So I don't want to go too far because we've invested a lot of time, effort, and energy into this. But the idea is that we can assess, is it estrangement or is it alienation? And combining some very approved tests that have been around for a long time, and both mom and dad and even the kids take it, and it's very thorough, and it picks up on deceit. So when one parent or the other is being dishonest or deceitful, well, it picks up on that. So now, okay, so you're being deceitful this way, so now we're going to add a few more assessments and ask more questions, and then we get we can make our finding to the judge, so that before you have reunification, before you go into a home study before you go into a psych evaluation, well, let's have a little better idea what we're dealing with. And so we're having some resistance here in the North Texas area, because a lot of the people that are making money on doing the home studies, doing the psych evaluations, doing the custodial visits, the reunification therapy, well, they're going, well, you're cutting into our business. And it's kind of like, well, no, in fact, we're going to help you do your business better if you just let us do our thing. I mean, if you're a reunification therapist, well, how do you know what you're doing? Are you dealing with estrangement? Are you dealing with alienation? If you know what you're dealing with, well, now you can direct your therapy and be more effective. So we're making some inroads, some headway, and we're hoping that here within the next month or two, we can actually get us a court case to be able to prove, hey, this is what we got. And currently we're meeting before professional organizations of therapists and lawyers and judges to explain to them what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Well, it sounds to me, Rod, like you have the answer, really, and that is to keep that term and to say, here is the science behind how to identify what you're dealing with, so that we stop having this subjective application of whatever a judge or a lawyer wants to decide that they think they're seeing and what punishment should follow. Yeah, but like you said, when it comes down to it, corruption is always the bottom line. It's about money, and the corruption runs up and down both sides. And so that's why I just think it's so important that people know about you and they know about the work that you're doing. At the very least, let's get people to kind of stop, take a hard look at what's really going on, and if nothing else, get behind the efforts that you're making, because at the end of the day, I would hope at least the parents who are fighting this abuse aren't doing it for money. I don't believe they're doing it for money. So with that not being a factor with them, they should all rally around the idea of streamlining the ability to have justice and peace restored, really, in their lives and their families' lives. Well, I sure appreciate you having me on. I am actually going to have to step off now. I've got another appointment, but I hope that you'll keep talking about the solutions, and I'll definitely be listening in. Thank you so much. Rod, it was great to see you again.
Absolutely, Melanie. We'll have to get together soon.
Definitely. We're both in Texas, so it should happen someday. All
Thank
right.
you. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much.
Bye.
Bye, Melanie.
So this Kayden's law did not make it through California. It didn't
Not,
pass.
no, it did, but not, or I don't know that it was signed by the governor. It passed in Pennsylvania, pretty much in direct, exactly step for step as what it was passed through Congress. And that generated a lot of surprise. And people within the alienation community took notice. And so there was a group that which they reached out and said, hey, you're a school teacher, would you reach out? Because school teachers are part of the reporting, but that's all they can do is be part of the reporting, not part of the testifying. And so there was a whole group that wrote letters asking and not begging members of the California state legislature to be aware. Take a look. And I just basically asked questions saying, hey, the law says that, or the bill says that, teachers should do this, mental health professionals should do that. Okay, fine. But if all you want me to do is report, but I can't then testify more into what I've seen, why I know by law I have to, but there's way more than just the law that goes into the reporting process.
What also is concerning about this whole thing is the false allegations. You and I have been through this, and there's got to be a better way. I mean, I feel really bad about what happened to you and this other little girl, Kayden, but there's got to be a better way to write this bill.
Yeah, and I don't know what the answer is. I'm sorry to say I don't have the right answer, but I know that this quite isn't it. Again, you're ignoring certain pieces of information that are present.
Mhm.
And what I find so amazing is that despite all the people that perpetuate the alienation, and they almost always follow a checklist.
Mhm.
None of them know each other, but they all engage in many of the exact same behaviors. And so if our mental health profession, if our legal profession is going to kind of take sides in this, then justice isn't going to be delivered in the way that we have been taught it does. I mean, Lady Liberty is blind for a reason,
Mhm.
and you don't see her picking up one side um, of her bandana or her blindfold. And the
Mhm.
scales of justice are to be
Mhm.
level and weigh the evidence. And it's just so disappointing that the some evidence just is not allowed or is ignored because of a bias. And that
Right.
I find very disturbing. And you and I wound up on the receiving end of some of that bias.
Mhm. Mhm. And with that Cadence bill, I guess the, other side is not even allowed to present evidence. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not even, they're not even gonna look at their evidence.
I I'm not I'm not real 100% positive on that. I do know that when we're looking at it, it's predominantly from a woman's abuse point of view.
Mhm.
And that's what I opposed, was the idea that this is a woman's only thing.
Mhm.
When I can say from my own experience, that's not the case. Here in Texas over the last, well, let's see. Well, Eric was killed almost 11 years, well, will be 11 years ago, um,
Mhm.
later this month. And it is in that time, there have been quite a few examples of other women doing that here in Texas. There was over in Fort Worth, a husband and wife were getting a divorce, and the woman did not want her husband to be able to take the kids, so she killed both of them. There was, and that's been maybe 6 years ago, seven
Mhm.
years ago, something like that. Then here just a few years ago, right before COVID, there was a lady who was again afraid that her husband was going to take the kid and never, she was never going to see him again. So she kidnaps him, and an Amber Alert goes out. She sees the Amber Alert go off on her phone, and she happened to be in Waco at the time, pulls off into a parking garage and executes her son before killing herself.
Mhm.
I mean, so that's three Texas examples in 11 years that show that women can do this. Now, men do it too.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, you're, um, you know, you're as you're the female receiving side of the same kind of thing, and it's not a gender issue.
Mhm.
And to say that it is, uh, well, as Melanie said, you're choosing to ignore one half of the argument.
Mhm. And while we're sitting around here arguing instead of pulling together and getting this, a remedy to this, I the judiciary, the family law community is just having a good old laugh.
Hmm.
And they think this is great because you keep this animosity going and this division. Family court can go on forever now.
And
Instead of, you know, fathersrights.org, why don't we make it parentsrights.org?
sure, sure,
Because
and there's some movement towards that. In fact, here in Dallas, they are they're pushing the idea that it is parents,
Mhm.
that they I think you can still find them as the men's group,
Mhm.
but they will argue I did know at least the Dallas or the North Texas chapter president, and he was saying, yes, this is a parent thing. This is, not a man only thing.
Mhm.
So I think in some areas they are making some move in the right direction.
Mhm.
And I have been working and affiliated with the Parental Alienation Study Group for 4 years now. And they are a group of professionals who are professional counselors, professional educators, people with PhDs, and they are invested in quality research
Mhm.
using scientific data to argue what you and I know is true
Mhm.
and be able to present this in research findings and papers, making its way into uh, a wide variety of professional journals that can now be used in court settings and be used to help change laws that can help protect, well, not so much our children anymore, but other children
Mhm.
from going through what our kids went through, and to save other parents from going through what we went through, because
Mhm.
it just is horrible.
Mhm.
Absolutely, positively, without a doubt, the worst possible experience.
Right. I mean, I try to intercept anyone thinking about going into family court. I try to catch people. I mean, even if I'm overhearing a conversation, I'll butt in and I'll hand them my business card and say, if you want to talk about this, I, you know, I, I, I'll do anything to help you not go in there. I
Mhm.
mean,
It's expensive. This summer, when I was off from school, I spent a fair amount of time up at our local county courthouse, just listening, talking to various lawyers, talking to different judges. And I am pleased to say that at least in our county, there was some open-mindedness
mm,
that they have seen, and they want to know more about alienation so that they as a judge can be more cognizant, more aware
mm,
of what can they can do. And that made me feel very grateful. Some of them actually were familiar with my name, since it was the same courthouse that I went through uh 12 years ago with my divorce case that again ultimately led to Eric's death. So that made me feel again
mm,
positive that some of the things that, even though were tragic, and I wish I didn't have to deal with all that and go through all of that, there is a silver lining, so to speak,
mm,
and that change is starting. And there's, at least in some areas, a fertile ground for more information to be delivered,
mm.
so that way we can indeed achieve what we want um, as soon as we possibly can, hopefully in our lifetime.
Now, were those judges that you spoke with, were they younger? Were they middle age? Uh, the judges that I dealt with were, we'll say 70 that look like 90. Uh,
They were
correct?
mostly younger.
Oh, they were
They were
younger. That's good.
predominantly women, and they were in their 30s and 40s, and were willing to, they weren't convinced, but they were willing to listen.
Mhm,
And so the ladies that I'm working with on our uh, parental alienation assessment, or estrangement versus alienation assessment, um, we're trying to get in front of every month or so. They have a judges only get together. And so we're trying desperately to get on their agenda for an upcoming month so that we can present our presentation, so that way, again, here we are.
mhm,
Let us help you. If we can help you keep your docket from being clogged. I mean,
mhm,
I think we've talked before where 90% of the docket is taken of divorce cases anyway, are taken up by 10%, or 90% of their time is taken up by 10% of the cases. And so, and let's stop the frequent flyers, and let's, you know, I was listening to one case where they were arguing, and this was in mid-June, and they go, we need to get this fixed and let's solve this now, because the court says I don't have any more openings for, you know, a 3 to 4 day trial until mid-December. So waiting 6 months to hash this out. And it was kind of like, that's part of the problem, is that it takes so long because there's so much going on in our court system. There's so many divorce issues. There's so many civil issues. I mean, here in Collin County, we have some family law only courtrooms, but most of them are general jurisdiction. And so they handle criminal, civil, and family. And so they're overwhelmed. And with COVID, they've kind of, the backlog really grew. And so if we can help stop the frequent flyers by, you know, when you first hear the words alienation, when you hear the words estrangement, when you hear the words of, you know, visitation interference, then let's go deeper. Let's not ignore that and go, well, it'll work itself out. No, it won't. You and I both know that it grows and it festers and gets worse. So again, if we can get the ideas out there that we can, you know, we can help, then I think we will make a great stride. But the only kicker that we're waiting, one of the biggest issues we're waiting on, is these ladies are doing this on the side because they've got full-time practices that take up most of their time, trying to get it copyrighted, getting it patented, so that way the intellectual property doesn't get stolen. Because that's, I'm sorry to say, another big problem is where amongst professional educators, stealing is a common thing. This here, we don't want somebody to take our idea, steal it, and pass it off as their own.
Right.
I hope that doesn't sound selfish, but
no,
the idea is to share this, but we don't, we kind of like, we've been working on this for 4 years and don't want to, so I'm really excited. We're almost there. We're almost to the launching point. So I'm super excited and cannot wait to have this take off, because I think once it starts, it'll be like a snowball rolling down a hill.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know when that happens, because I'll have you back on. What, you know, I have been admonished on is that, you know, when a woman brings up domestic violence in the courtroom, then they turn that on her and say she's alienating the other parent. Now, in my case, I didn't even bring up domestic violence, which there was undercurrents of. You know, I wasn't slapped around yet. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, he did raise his fist to me, and he did raise a knife to me, but I never brought that up to my lawyer. I don't know why I did. I just didn't. I don't know why I just didn't think to, or I just didn't take it seriously that was happening. But his attorney brought up parental alienation, that I was alienating the kids from him. And I'm going, wait a minute, we're just sitting here, and he just shot that out of his mouth, and they just ran with it, on top of the calling the woman mentally ill deal. You know, everybody's mentally ill as soon as you walk into that family courtroom. And so, you know, whether it's, I don't know what to say, because it's like, yeah, sure, there is domestic violence, but, you know, it shouldn't be used against someone in a courtroom.
Oh, I concur. And that's the downside, is that so much can be brought up, and it's almost like a wild, wild west, where anything goes, and there's little that is off limits, or if you don't want to call it the wild, wild west, maybe a Jerry Springer episode, where again, the most outrageous you can come up with, the better. And so that's where I like the ideas that maybe we can find a way to kind of rein in the silliness.
Right.
But there just seems to be lawyers who have low scruples,
Mhm.
and until there's consequences, a lot of judges are afraid to admonish publicly with sanctions on lawyers,
Mhm.
because at least, well, because most of your state judges are elected, they need the lawyers to fund them,
Mhm.
fund their reelection campaigns, which again, I don't know. I mean, there's positives and negatives to elections versus appointments, but I don't know. It's like so many things I see in our society today where there's no rules, there's no boundaries, there's
Mhm.
no acceptable behavior. That
Right.
the more wild and crazy you can get, well, the better off you are. And it just disappoints me.
Right. There's no accountability with the attorneys or the judges. And if an attorney's going to kick in $1,000 for the judge's daughter's judge campaign, then she should be moved to a different venue. She would have to actually sell her house and move 400 miles away to work in another courthouse.
Different county, sure.
Yeah, I think that's probably what should happen. That way they're not this good old buddy system. This has to be broken up.
I think in a larger metropolitan center, where North Texas exists, the Dallas, Fort Worth, there's basically 4 counties. They're pretty decent. But as you move into smaller areas where population centers are smaller, your judges can get on and they can stay there for 30, 40 years. And uh, they get chased. I have heard different judges say, well, I already know where this is going 5 minutes in. And so they'll stop listening. And it's kind of like, but my case is just maybe a little different,
Mhm.
but they're too busy working on a ruling for another case, or they're looking up information for another case, or writing an opinion for another case.
Mhm.
And so as a consequence, they're distracted. Because again, they have already predetermined where this is going. So they have predetermined their response.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I find that disappointing
Mhm.
that that is the case. But again, if they're overwhelmed with all kinds of silliness because of the frequent flyers that keep going back again and again and again, part of me, I've never understood this, why a judge, you ask a parent to do this, do X, and parent doesn't do what they ask. Okay, so you come back, you admonish them, you give them a public tongue lashing. Okay, now go out and do it again. Now I'm telling you, do it this time. And they still don't. Well,
Mhm.
there's no consequence. And until there's a consequence, the behavior won't change. And I mean, you see that when we raise our kids, we tell
Mhm.
them, hey, don't touch the hot stove.
Mhm.
And when they touch the hot stove, they're going to get a consequence. Don't run out in front, don't run out in a crowded parking lot. Okay,
Mhm.
why? Well, there's going to be a consequence if they do. And you want them not to get the consequence of a burnt hand
Mhm.
or the consequence of being hit by a car. So you've got to, I don't know. I maybe I'm just speaking silly here, but it just disappoints me. And I don't get, with all the judges that I have talked to, why they are resistant to do more than just give a public admonishment in court and not have real substance in their rebuke of a client who doesn't do what they're asked to do
Mhm.
or keeps engaging in bad behavior. And I mean, the only answer I've ever really been given is I don't want to make the lawyer upset, and because I'll need their help for reelection.
Oh, man. Well, I'm looking at 2 cases in Mecklenburg, North Carolina, and, also Cabarrus County. North Carolina. And these are women where these judges are absolutely refusing to look at cold, hard evidence of abuse, not just to them, but to their children. And this is a good old boy network that's super tight. And, this is not gender based.
Mhm.
This is happening to everybody. I've seen it happen with a guy I'm working with, that he's getting screwed over in family court. You know,
Mhm.
I don't know why these judges, I would like to get in there and talk to some, but I don't know.
It is disappointing, and it is a culture, and I'm not sure how you change that, unless we're able to. I don't know. There's a lot of things that seem to, in my mind, are going to have to change, and it's going to have to start maybe here in the bigger cities, so that way the smaller courts,
Mhm,
a lawyer can say, well, okay, here in Texas, in Dallas County, they, court precedent. And this is what they did. Why can't we do that here?
mhm,
Wherever it might be. And I don't know. I'm not really, there's so many issues, and they're all kind of interwoven, that to say that this one thing will fix it, I struggle with. But I think that there's so many problems that have grown out of an apathy, out of a failure to look at and focus on the right and wrong.
mhm,
And it appears to me so much we focus on the money. And I have seen some amazing lawyers here who are not money driven, and they do what is right for their clients. And I have seen some that they're total sharks. They really have earned the reputation of a snake in the grass lawyer. So I've been lucky enough to see both the good and the bad.
mhm,
So I'm emboldened by the fact that there are good lawyers that they do have ethics that they follow. And there are younger judges coming up that are
mhm,
replacing older judges, that are open-minded, that are willing to accept that there's maybe more going on than being presented, to be clever enough to see through silliness and explore, well, let's take a deeper look into
mhm,
this. So that, at least here in North Texas, I'm encouraged. There's
mhm.
still some of the good old boy network,
Yeah.
running. There's some counties around here that they've got some good old boy judges and the good old boy lawyers, and they'll argue in front of each other during the day and go out for drinks at night.
Mhm. Or go golfing,
Oh, okay, sure.
you know. So I'm, anxious for your work to come out, and I'd like to have you back on.
Sure.
And, um, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, yeah, I've got for okay, take my tongue out of my teeth. Let's try this again. I have a website that I use to promote the book, but I'm trying to also promote just other aspects of divorce,
Mhm,
how to be amiable. Is I've had a doctor friend say many times, so this is not my original thought, this is his, but I repeat it frequently. Divorce ends the marriage. It's not to end the family.
mhm,
And if we can get to that point where you can coexist, it's okay to be angry. I mean, again, marriages fail for a multitude of reasons, but the kids ought to always be first. And
mhm,
so for the love of Eric.com is a website that I have out there that I use to push different articles, to put out for just different information. And I also have a podcast that a good friend of mine, we co-host together. It's called Home Sweet Home. And it's Rod McCall and Bryce Runge. And we're both school teachers, but he does motivational speaking. In fact, Melanie helped him write his book as well. But we do a podcast where we're trying to help families, not get divorced, and help mom and dad know how to not just talk to each other, but talk to their kids, and help kids be able to understand and talk to mom and dad. Because as a teacher, I feel like I've been a facilitator for a lot of conversations with kids as they talk about, well, I just can't talk to my parents.
Mm.
And, I deal with parents and they're going, oh, that kid of mine, they're just wearing me out. They don't listen to nothing. And it's kind of like, well, okay. So our podcast deals with a variety of issues of divorce, but also of stress, anxiety, you name it. There's not a topic we haven't really hit. We've talked about alcohol, we talked about drug use, all kinds of things. And so we use that as kind of a platform, I guess a soapbox platform of things that we want to talk about. And so again, we're Home Sweet Home. So we're not as good as yours.
No,
but
come on. Well, where can we find Home Sweet Home?
Anywhere that you can get a podcast.
Okay.
So whether it's Amazon or Spotify or wherever, just type in Home Sweet Home. We've recently changed the logo, but it's a yellow circle. It has Home Sweet Home on it. Has, again, my name and my friend Bryce Runge. And I think I shared an email link with you. It's our first episode, which was a year and a half ago. The first few episodes, well, they were a little dry, but we got better. I think we're better. I think the more you do anything, you get a little bit better at. And so hopefully people will listen and, pick up some tidbits to help, whether you're married, divorced, or not. Again, help and understand there's so much that goes into communication. And I think so many times we miss it. And if we can help people not be divorced, if I can help keep you out of family court, then Yahoo. If you're going there, well, okay, we may not help you much with family court, but we can at least help you, again, understand the emotions that your kids are going through. Because I think one of our goals is focusing on kids, because if we can learn better ways to work with them, teach them, talk to them, but more importantly, help our kids also to learn how to talk to us. Because it is a two-way street. They want to be respected, but I don't know. Kids don't come with playbooks, so we fly by the seat of our pants. And so we're trying to put our experiences with life, with again, teaching, working with kids and parents for as long as we have, our trips through, because he's divorced just like I am. He's a single parent. We're both remarried. We both got stepkids. So we've got a lot of aspects that we try and bring in to, again, make home a place that you actually want to go, not a place you try and avoid.
Right. Oh, that's excellent. Okay. Well, don't jump off.
Okay.
Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Mary Ann Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Rod McCall, author, and other exciting guests. Thank you for coming on, Rod. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
And we'll do it again.
All right.
Yeah.